What's up guys, welcome to Film and TV Reviews, and today I'm reviewing Green Book, about an Italian-American man who's hired by an African-American man to help him tour the southern states of America during 1962, when those southern states were a very racist place to be, especially if you're African-American. Hell, for some bizarre reason, it's still like that today, which is a shame. So let me say this right from the word go, this is a brilliant film and I do recommend you watch it as soon as you can. Had I watched it before doing my best films of 2018 list, although it wasn't out in the UK so I couldn't have, this would definitely have been in my top films of the year. It's a great mix of comedy and drama. It knows when to be funny, it knows when to be serious. The characters are really likable because of that. But it is a little predictable. As the film goes on and on, you know exactly what certain characters are going to do, you know exactly how it's going to end, so that might be a bit disappointing for some. Throughout the film, it has important themes and messages about racism, about equality, so on and so forth. I think it addresses them really well and really succinctly. The director also wrote it, so that he really knows how to get his point across in as little time and as few words as possible, which is really good, because it's just, here's the point, move on. And speaking of the direction, it's really well paced. It never slows down. In fact, if anything, it gets better as the film goes along. It constantly builds up. And there's a great tone throughout. The comedy and the drama I've already mentioned mixes really well. It's, despite the fact that it's tackling some big, heavy, hard-hitting themes, and it does a good job of making them very palatable. Moving on to the characters. The characters are brilliant, the acting is amazing. This is Viggo Mortensen's best performance to date. He's channeling a bit of Tony Soprano here, and there is a Soprano link here because his character was actually an actor in The Sopranos. So yeah, bit of trivia there for you. But yeah, Viggo Mortensen's great, Mahershala Ali is great. Really can't fault the acting, they deserve all the accolades they're going to get. Because of that, they're very likable, they have a great chemistry together. Viggo is very much the laid-back, take life as it comes kind of guy, whereas Mahershala is a, what's the best way to describe this? Prim and proper, much more about respect and dignity. One of the things I liked is that it does subvert roles and expectations. So for example, you would typically expect to have the white man being the guy bossing around the African American man, whereas in this, it's the other way around. The African American one is bossing around the Italian-American white guy. So it's really interesting that way on. Also, Linda Cardellini's in this. I think she's a really underappreciated and underutilized actress. She's good in this film, so yeah, a little shout out to her. The film does a good job of exploring stereotypes, subverts expectations like I've already mentioned. It supports others though, which I think it does really well. I think it looks at stereotypes and what you should expect. So for example, Viggo Mortensen's character assumes that all African Americans like fried chicken and all African Americans should know how to eat fried chicken. So that's a little, it's presented in a humorous way, but it does a good job of saying, hey, you can't always judge a book by its cover. And that's basically what this whole film's about, showing you that people are more than just the way they look. Moving on to production, this has a really good soundtrack. Mahershala Ali's character is a pianist and a musician. And interestingly, it looks like he's actually playing the piano, which is really impressive. I don't know if he could play the piano before. I imagine he probably had to learn it for this. So yeah, really thumbs up for Mahershala for doing that. I'm assuming all the piano playing was legitimately him, because it certainly looked like it. Great sets, costumes and props. It is set in 1962, so they have to adhere to that time period. They do a good job of it. It's very convincing. I've talked about the script and direction before. All really well written. Really to the point, doesn't beat around the bush. I like that. Very funny at times, hilarious at times actually. Very dramatic, it knows when to get its point across, it knows when to be serious and when to be funny. Really good production that way on. Before I move on to spoilers, if you're going to stop watching, I suggest you go watch the film, then come back and watch the rest of this. I do recommend it, it's a brilliant film. But you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at @TheUnskilledGrantBurton. You can also subscribe to my channel, give me a thumbs up, and leave a comment and feedback down below. Let me know what you think of Green Book. But now it's time for spoilers, so if you haven't seen the film, you might want to stop watching here. The film has some good foreshadowing and callbacks. So for example, Viggo Mortensen's character finds a, what is it, like a jade rock at some point, and there's a whole humorous section about that, how he wants to steal it and basically he's forced to put it back. Well, it later comes back in the film. I thought that was a nice touch. There's also the thing about Pittsburgh, which comes back in a really funny and random way at the end. And there's the thing about the gun as well. Yeah, it does a good job of setting things up earlier on and then giving them a good payoff later on, which I think was nice. I thought that the film was really good at exploring the ideas of racism and expectations. So Mahershala Ali's character at one point says that he's too white to be black and he's too black to be white. So he doesn't really fit in anywhere. I thought that whole storyline and the idea of that just because you've got a particular skin color doesn't mean you're necessarily going to fit in with other people of your skin color. So yeah, it really does a good job of exploring that. I really like the ending. It is a bit predictable. It's very happy and cheerful. You can see it coming a mile off, but it does end the film on a nice note. And because the characters have this great chemistry and bond, it's kind of what you want. So I'm not going to complain about that. One thing I will say about the ending though is that earlier in the film, Viggo Mortensen's family are clearly concerned when two African American plumbers come by to help Linda Cardellini in the kitchen. So much so that they're there purely to keep an eye on them in case they get up to any mischief. Not that I think they would. But at the end of the film, when Mahershala Ali's character comes into the family house, they're like, welcome him in open arms, they're all cheerful and happy, they've clearly got no problem. So I found that jump from the beginning to the end on their part to be really just jarring and odd, particularly since they hadn't been the ones that had gone on the journey with Mahershala Ali's character, so they didn't really have that much of a reason to. Throughout the film, Viggo Mortensen's character writes some letters, and this is something that supports his acting ability because he does narrate them. It's really funny, probably some of the funniest parts of the film, especially when Mahershala comes in and helps him out a little towards the end, and then Linda at the end of the film eventually thanks him in a very touching moment for helping him write the letters. So I did like all of that in the film. And one of the things I really, really liked throughout the film is how Mahershala's character, despite being the victim of racism, he stood up for himself, he stood up for what was right. So for example, at one point when he's in a big manor house, he tries to go to the toilet, but the owner says, no, your toilet's outside in the shed, basically. So I like how he stood up for himself. I liked how there was the bit in the restaurant, how he refused to perform because they wouldn't let him eat in the restaurant. So yeah, all of that I really liked. I really thought it done a good job of addressing these big topics and themes. So yeah, that's Green Book. That's all I've got to say about it. It's a brilliant film. One of the best films I've seen all year. Check it out, really. It's really, really good.